North Africa 41, a war game about, well, you know what, the title is kind of pretty clear about it. It is a two-player war game in which a player will control the forces of the Axis that are landing in Tripoli or later in other ports and making their way toward the east. And on the other side, we have the Allies that are trying to prevent the Axis from doing precisely so. They start from Alexandria. They also can use some naval shipment. They start with control of Tobruk and pretty much with everything on the map until things start changing. The Axis do their push. The Commonwealth comes back with a counter push. If you're familiar with the topic, you know the general idea. Also, if you're familiar with the designer who is Mark Simonich, probably you have pretty high expectations because he's one of my favorite wargame designers, but you're also warned that there's going to be a degree of detail and complexity, which is probably not going to be great for beginner wargamers. We know with Simonich, one kind of zone of control just isn't enough. It's not going to cut it. And you're going to have a lot of things like that in this game. There's also why I'm just going to give you a general sense of how the game works. I'm not going to go into too much detail. The game is played on a paper map, or I should say actually two paper maps that you place next to each other. And you're going to need quite a long table because, well, that's North Africa from Alexandria to Tripoli. You got the whole thing. And of course, most of the action will take place on a fairly narrow strip up there. You can try to outmaneuver your opponent, but, well, it's a big investment. So the Axis forces will come from there and then make their way there using trucks, using mechanized units, as the Axis reinforcements and resources and everything pretty much comes from Italy. And it needs to go through Malta. So there's going to be a die roll to see how much of that stuff that you want actually will make it there. Also, you can spend resources to have your supplies from Italy land in Benghazi instead of Tripoli, which cuts some time, some distance. And resources are, well, a resource. They are a currency. It's called resources, but they will be generated by random die rolls, and you can spend them to acquire different kinds of advantages for the Axis. Again, shipping stuff into Benghazi instead. And also, again, there are ports, and then later in the game you can transfer things from port to port, but it's dangerous because your convoys may get sunk. The base of operation of the ally player is the Nile Delta, and that is connected to Alexandria. And again, there will be a procedure there to transfer things from there to there, and then on to the core of the action. Again, early on, you're going to see a big push from the Axis because there aren't many units at all on the board, not enough Allied defenders to protect them. As that happens, the people in Tobruk will be digging fortifications like crazy. You're probably going to have a confrontation around here. Meanwhile, the Axis are sending reinforcements there, and so things get real. Now, the turn structure, you're going to have a turn track there. And each turn has three or two impulses. They're basically like mini turns. They're what we would call player turn. Actually, each impulse is a ally player turn followed by an Axis player turn. So that's the way it works. So turn one, it will be a player goes, then the other player goes, then the same. So basically, you're gonna have three player turns per player each main turn, and then you check if there is a supply attrition. The further you go towards the base of the opponent, the more likely you are that random check will hurt you. And then you check if you're playing the campaign game. You check to see if what the situation is with victory points, and then you repeat. During many turns, so there will be three impulses. Again, impulse here is used different from other war games. It simply means a player turn. But not during summer. During summer is hot, and you're there cooking your eggs on your tanks. And so during summer, you only have two impulses. So 2 players' turn per main turn. And the different scenarios and the campaign game, the idea is that points will be scored based on control of airports on the map. That is the main thing here. Units, we got different kinds, and here I put a selection of units there for you. We got, of course, infantry, and we got mechanized. These are the Italians. Yes, the Axis has the Italians and the Germans. And we have attack factor, and tanks also have a tank factor. Then we have defense, and then we have movement. We also have a stacking value for some units, and the box behind the defense may be, there may not be one, there may be generic background, or there may be a white box or a red box indicating the quality of the unit. We have tokens representing supplies. We're in North African, so this is a game that really places a lot of emphasis on logistics. You gotta move these around. You gotta ship them, you gotta track them. And so trucks are extremely important here. They have a movement of 5, they don't have combat values, and they have 2 sides. This is the regular side, and this is the side when they're transporting a supply. So you can quite literally send your truck to a place that has a supply, boom, 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 driving there, go there, and then you load the truck and you remove the supply. And later you can flip it back if you're using the supply or dropping it somewhere. You can also use your trucks to transport units, and not only will they therefore have a higher movement value if you're in transport, and most importantly, they get the bonuses for roads and highways that mechanized do and infantry does not have. We also have headquarters, which also can be depleted, and for a similar effect as when you use supplies. Because when you're attacking, and that's when it's most important, when you're attacking, you need, if you want to use the full combat strength of your units, there is a cap of 10 attack points unless you spend supplies. Also, if you want to use the benefits from your tank points, you also need supply. So you don't need to spend supply to attack, but you need to spend supplies if you want to have any chance of your attacks doing something, really. And then we have replacements that will be received by the players during the game. Again, per se, they don't do much. They only travel, and you want to put them on trucks probably, and they can be used to replenish units that have been depleted, or simply bring back units that have been destroyed. So these units, of course, will be on the board. Where else would they be? And they will be doing their beautiful thing, going around, transporting and moving and fighting. Beginning of the turn, you roll for Malta. Yeah, the situation in Malta changes during the game. The Axis is able to suppress Malta at the beginning of the game. Later on, Malta is not suppressed anymore, and so actually that will generate a negative modifier when Malta is active, a negative modifier for the shipments from Italy into Africa, which means reinforcements and supplies coming from Italy are more likely to sink in the ocean. Roll for Malta, and then a couple of other more traditional upkeep things. Now, as I said, one player goes and the other goes, and so on and so forth. But looking at the player's turn in detail, we roll on the event phase at the beginning of a player's turn, and the Axis and the allies have different event tables, and these event tables will either give you a resource point, a generic one that you then will track on a specific area on the board. Oh, I just got a resource point. And so you can spend it to buy different kinds of advantages, or they will give you a specific advantage with less flexibility there. And we have different markers that you will acquire either because you spend resources or you just get them from the table. and such as Comando Supremo that allows German and Italian units to attack together. Air support gives you shifts, and the allies also have that. Air transport, so you can transport units from Italy to North Africa without sending many convoys that may be sunk. Coastal shipping increases your chances of moving things by sea. Then we can use replace. So after we roll for events, we use replacements. We check to see if we're able to complete a fortification. And if you've seen games of this kind, one turn using a resource, you can start a fortification, and then the following turn it may be completed. In some situations, you don't need to roll. In others, you do. And then we move. Movement will be, in most cases, by land, using the movement value indicated there, modified by terrain, of course. But then you can also send things, ship them by sea, but in that case, you need to check this table, because, again, when you send things by ship, there is a chance. You roll there, you apply modifiers, and it tells you if there's a number there, then each unit or each token in your convoy that's been shipped by sea needs to roll a die, and if you roll equal to or lower than that, boom, bottom of the sea. So that's for movement. By road, by land, there is a railroad, only one that usually the ally player will use, and again, possibly by sea. After we're done moving, I guess that's what everybody wants to know about. There's going to be combat, maybe. It's a war game, isn't it? Combat is going to be from 1 to multiple hexes into 1 hex of the opponent. So I could gather these 2 stacks against that one if I'm using Comando Supremo. Or maybe I attack that one, maybe that one, maybe that one. And combat is not mandatory. The idea is probably what you expect. That is, you will calculate a ratio between the attack of the attacker and the defense factors of the defender. You will apply modifiers because it's Simonich based on, for example, elite combined arms, and most importantly, or very important, combat tank modifiers. The side that has the most tank factors than the other gains an advantage there. And then you will, once you have the right column, possibly apply other modifiers, maybe shifts from air support. Once you have the column, roll the die, and you apply the result, which may be exchange. One side may have to retreat. One or both sides may take damage. The retreating side may try to do a determined defense instead. Again, something that we've seen in Simonich before. And, well, that's the general idea. Retreat may cause your unit, will cause your unit to become disrupted and possibly go in full retreat. A retreat may be followed by advance of the combat and possibly breakthrough combat. There's a lot going on. And yes, a lot going on. After combat, we got the recovery where you can rally units and remove some markers, check for supply, check for delay markers, which is something that the ally player can do to delay the opponent. And that's the idea. In general, you will continue following this procedure until one of the players wins instant victory or until the end of the scenario that you're playing. I like this game quite a bit. It is clearly not a war game for beginners. And when you know Simonich, you expect a level of detail there, which is perfectly fine if you're familiar with wargaming and you appreciate the level of detail and chrome that brings. But even as a seasoned wargamer, there are times in which I wonder if it couldn't be done just reducing some of the general overhead. Sure, there are different convoy tables for units coming from Italy or shipping. from one African location to the other, so different anti-shipping things, okay? And then the different modifiers, that's fine. But then the third impulse, there's a modifier for the waning moon, and I really wonder, do we need that -1 that we're supposed to remember? But then the general idea is that, well, it's pretty interesting. It's a pretty interesting conundrum because using convoy coastal shipping is very effective if it works at all. But losing some units at sea for the Axis can be pretty tragic because, generally speaking, you're going to have fewer great units and you're going to have a lot of these Italian units that have their uses. You can launch them into fairly kamikaze attacks against Tobruk, and from time to time you roll a 6 and they do something and they place a significant dent. They are the uses. They can threaten supply lines. They can protect supply lines as those mighty tanks go ahead and inflict some serious damage. However, those mighty German mechanized units also very brittle. They can take a lot, but they can inflict a lot, but they cannot take a lot of damage. And again, so these like numerous weaker Italian units can be very powerful. The overall composition of the Axis forces is more consistently good with some really excellent units, and they just keep coming. So what you have is at the level of the structure, the narrative is a game that is incredibly thematic. From the point of view, which I already mentioned, of how the nationalities work, how the logistics work with the conundrums of shipping by sea, of having these trucks going back and forth, and the supplies are very physical, very material. They're tokens. You need to bring them wherever you need to be. It is a game that really emphasizes the realities of the historical conflict, and in this case, in this sense, to me, is an excellent historical war game. That's the reason why I accept reading all those rules, digesting all those modifiers, remembering that there are multiple types of hexes, that there is a slight modifier here or there. I accept to digest all that because ultimately I see history come to life. And this is really what happens here. Again, at the beginning, because of this, especially as you get familiar, you're digesting the rules and the concepts, it may take a little while to get started. And once you have the rules, the logistics still will feel cumbersome. Before you create your own system of trucks going back and forth, delivering supplies, delivering units, and you realize that that will take you less time as the game progresses, which almost feels like, well, I was in the position of somebody who's trying to figure out a system, and once I have it, then managing it takes a lot less effort and time than before. And yes, it may feel paradoxical that at the beginning you're figuring out how to cover these enormous distances, and then the fight happens in an area which is like this big on the board. But then again, people start trying to outmaneuver each other, cut each other's supply lines, and so the action is a little more spread out, but it will never be all over the map, which you expected from this being North Africa 41. Tobruk will of course receive a lot of attention, and the areas around it also. So it's a very interesting game that shows you the combat element, the logistics, takes a little to get used to, but then you have an experience that really is fun, historical, incredibly thematic, and it puts you in the position of the commanders, and it faces you with exactly the same dilemmas. Should I launch an attack now that is like almost good but not very good, or wait a little bit longer, but they may be reorganized, they won't be disrupted, they may get supplies, etc, etc, etc. The element that I should have mentioned is that although you have the ratio element 3-1, 4-1, is not so much about counting exactly. I need to make sure to have 24 to their 8. There is that element, but actually you're going to get the best shifts, not so much from crunching numbers, but from delivering supplies correctly and getting those shifts that you get from the tank factors. That's the biggest element, because, by the way, there are caps. You can have up to 15 points in defense and 30 points in in attack. So these caps actually emphasize the maneuvering element and the interconnection between supplies and combat, and again reduce the problem of like, as a commander, why am I looking for 1 point somewhere? As a commander, I should be worrying, how do I deliver supplies to those tanks so they can maneuver the enemy and launch a powerful attack. The complexity of the rules places the emphasis on the elements of the campaign where the emphasis should be. So not for the casual or beginner or gamer, but definitely an excellent design for anybody who's willing to put in the work. North Africa 41. I love it.